It was a little after 3 o'clock on the morning of October 6, 1998, when Panama City, Florida police, responding to reports of a shooting, arrived at the home of 30-year-old Ron Stovall.
Just an ordinary working guy who had never been in any problems.
Inside, detectives found Ron dead, shot 8 times at close range.
He has powder burns in his eyes, which indicate that he was looking at his killer when the final shot was fired.
The person who did this goes in with a shotgun and puts it to his head and says the words, "This is for her." That's an execution.
But who did the shooter mean by her? And why would Ron be the target of an execution? The answer police came up with would shock the entire community. Ron's 51-year-old ex-mother-in-law, Ann Trexler.
When it came out that it was a murder for hire by a grandmother, this case just really got all sorts of attention.
Virginia. In 1958, when Ann was just 12 years old, her father skipped out, forcing Ann's mother to take on 2 jobs to try and make ends meet.
There were times when we didn't have enough food, and my mother would put the food on the table, and we would eat, and she wouldn't.
The oldest of 5 children, Ann was left in charge when her mother was working.
She was like my mother. She took care of me. She took care of all of us.
At 18, Ann married her high school sweetheart, Jack Trexler. Within 5 years, Ann had 2 daughters of her own to care for.
Family was at the center of Ann Trexler's life. She wore her emotions on her sleeve when it came to making sure everyone knew that that's what she was all about.
She wanted to be a stay-at-home mother, take care of her husband and her kids.
Like her mother, Ann's youngest daughter, Tina, also married young. At 20, Tina married naval officer Ron Stovall. Just a few months later, Tina told her mother she was expecting.
They were very happy, that she was going to have a baby. They were really extremely happy when Kirsten was born.
Not long after the arrival of Kirsten, Ron left the Navy, and he, Tina, and the baby moved to Ron's hometown of Panama City, Florida. But by 1995, Tina told her mother that her marriage was over.
It was a rather rocky event, not a long-term marriage at all.
Ann did whatever she could to help her daughter through the difficult time.
Ann's the type of person always wanted to help.
But Ann's desire to help Tina was frustrated by the 900-mile distance between them.
Ann made a decision she wanted to relocate to Florida to be close to her daughter and her grandchild.
In May of 1997, the Trexlers bought a house in Panama City, big enough for Tina and her now 6-year-old daughter to move in with them. Ann soon became just as zealous a grandmother as she had been a mother.
She was so wrapped up in that grandchild that she just tried to run everything.
In the fall of 1997, Tina's ex-husband, Ron Stovall, remarried. It wasn't long before Ron's new wife, Angelica, clashed with his ex-mother-in-law, Ann.
There certainly was a heightening of the conflict when Angelica and Ann Trexler got involved in the lives of Ron and Tina. There was no love lost between Angelica and Ann Trexler.
And when Ron announced that he intended to seek full custody of Kirsten and move her out of state, things only got worse.
If Ron moved and if he was allowed to take Kirsten with him, neither Tina nor Ann Trexler would have the easy access to Kirsten that they had had during much of her life.
On August 10, 1998, Ron Stovall filed a motion in Bay County Court requesting full custody of Kirsten. Ann and Jack immediately offered to help Tina pay for an attorney.
Ann Trexler had contacted me along with her daughter, Tina, to see if I would represent her in a custody battle.
Around that same time, Ann Trexler had begun to confide in her hairdresser, Kim Miller.
Everybody knows how it is when you go to your barber or your hair person. Same thing like a bartender, you talk to them a lot.
But Kim wasn't the kind of person the straight-laced, church-going Ann Trexler normally befriended.
She had a really, really bad drug habit, and it steadily got worse.
Kim's boyfriend, a small-time drug dealer named Tony Perez, also worked at the salon.
He was shampooing hair, selling cocaine out at the back door.
Kim might have been an unusual choice of friend for Ann, but the two hit it off. And as the custody hearing approached, Ann expressed her increasing frustration with her ex-son-in-law in no uncertain terms.
Ann started making statements to her hairdresser that Ron had made her life a living hell and that she would be a lot better off if he were dead.
Just a few minutes after 3 o'clock on the morning of October 6, 1998, Panama City Police received a number of 911 calls reporting a shooting. Police arrived at the home of 30-year-old Ron Stovall and his new wife, Angelica. Unhurt but in a state of shock, Angelica met police at the door. In the kitchen was the body of her husband, Ron Stovall. He had been shot 8 times at what looked to detectives like point-blank range.
He has powder burns in his eyes, which indicate to the police and to the experts that he was looking at his killer when the final shot was fired.
Angelica told police that as her husband left the house for his early morning shift at UPS, someone suddenly began shooting at him.
He's hit in the arm, and it knocks him down. But he sees a guy running at him with a gun pointed at him, so he jumps up and he turns, runs back into the house.
The shooter pursued him, forcing the front door open, despite Angelica's attempts to block it.
Angelica tries to keep him out. They're struggling over the door. He puts the gun in, and he fires a shot that misses her. The shot scares Angelica, and she turns and she runs into one of the back bedrooms.
Now inside, the attacker continued firing until Stovall was slumped on the kitchen floor. Even then, according to Angelica, the killer didn't stop.
Then what she hears from the bedroom is the killer say, "This is for her," a loud blast.
The initial investigation appeared to back up Angelica's story.
Police were able to find a number of items. They were able to find projectiles. They were able to find a shotgun shell outside.
But after the initial investigation of the crime scene, that was about all they had.
There really wasn't anything collected that night that immediately let the police know who a suspect might be.
Detectives also didn't have much to go on from Angelica's description of her husband's killer.
A man wearing a cap and I believe sunglasses with a little bit of the hair coming out of the cap.
That meant they had to start at the beginning.
Whenever there's a husband or a wife killed, the first attention is directed towards the surviving spouse. And so they did that, and they eventually found out that there was this problem in this custody issue over Kirsten.
Police learned that Ron's ex-wife Tina and her mother, Ann Trexler, were locked in a bitter custody battle with Ron at the time of his murder. Even so, police didn't consider either Tina or Ann as suspects.
Angelica had described a man that, as far as being the killer, that excluded Tina and excluded Ann Trexler. So she was not an immediate suspect.
But the question was, who would want Ron Stovall dead?
Just an ordinary working guy who never had any trouble with the police, and someone you would just think was just your average citizen.
On November 1st, almost a month after the shooting, detectives stumbled onto the first piece of the puzzle, although they didn't know it at the time.
A man who was living here in Bay County was arrested and charged with a home invasion robbery.
The man arrested for the Bay County robbery was Antonio Perez. Not long after he was in custody, police got a tip that Perez knew something about the Stovall murder. When police questioned Perez, he confirmed the tip, and then some.
He says, "What do you want me to say?" And I said, "Just tell me that you committed this murder." And he just said, "Okay, I did it." I got him to elaborate just a little bit more. But at that point, he was done. He really didn't want to talk to her.
I was messing with crystal methamphetamine and cocaine. So I was already where I wasn't supposed to be. I went there and I blew his head off.
In subsequent interviews, Perez claimed the murder was the result of a drug deal gone bad. But the police weren't so sure.
That was just as contrary to anything we had ever found out about our victim.
Not completely satisfied with Perez's explanation, police continued their investigation. It wasn't long before they discovered that Perez's girlfriend, Kim Miller, had talked to friends about the murder.
Kim Miller was questioned. She claimed to know nothing about the killing of Ron Stovall.
When detectives subpoenaed Kim's phone records, they discovered numerous calls to and from a person whose name had come up earlier in their investigation, Ann Trexler.
Ann Trexler had, in fact, within a short period of time of Ron's murder, made a call to Kim Miller that morning.
To police, Ann was the only one of the three who had a motive to want Ron Stovall dead. She became the focus of their investigation.
Here's Ann Trexler. Let's pin all these pieces of evidence up and see what we've got. And so that was a major break in the case.
But police needed more than just suspiciously timed phone calls to tie Ann Trexler to the crime. On January 28, 1999, police charged Kim Miller with being an accessory to murder.
She was told, if you get convicted of this, you could be facing up to life.
Prosecutors hoped that once faced with life in prison, she would turn on her friend. They were prepared to make her a deal, but there was one problem.
We really didn't know, since she was not that cooperative, what she could tell us. We didn't want to make an agreement with her before we knew what she said.
So prosecutors came up with a plan to get her to talk without committing to a deal.
The agreement was, we'll take your statement, we'll record it. If we can make an agreement, we keep the tape. If we can't make a plea agreement, you keep the tape and we can't use anything you said against you.
It worked. Kim told investigators that Ann Trexler was the mastermind behind Ron Stovall's murder.
They told Kim if she didn't testify and tell them how this happened, she was going to prison the rest of her life.
Her main purpose was to save her hide. Exactly. So she gives us the information. Yeah, Ann Trexler hired me to have him killed.
Kim explained how 51-year-old grandmother Ann Trexler had paid her to organize the execution of Ron Stovall.
She received $10,000 from Ann Trexler and conveyed the money, or most of the money, to Mr. Perez to kill Mr. Stovall. She was the go-between.
It was exactly the information prosecutors were looking for. They cut Kim a deal in exchange for her testimony.
In exchange for that, the charge was reduced to compounding a felony, where the maximum was 5 years.
Just 24 hours later, on February 15, 2000, police charged Ann Trexler with the murder of Ron Stovall. Coming up, at trial, one of the key prosecution witnesses has a change of heart.
Did Ann Trexler have anything to do with this homicide?
She had nothing to do with it.
On May 9, 2001, 2.5 years after the shooting of Ron Stovall, his former mother-in-law, Ann Trexler, walked into the Bay County Courthouse to stand trial for first-degree murder. 18 months earlier, Antonio Perez had pleaded guilty to shooting Stovall at his Panama City home. The 54-year-old grandmother was accused of hiring Perez to carry out the execution-style killing.
In Florida, there's only two possible punishments for murder in the first-degree charge. One is death, and one is life in prison without the possibility of parole, which in Florida really means you die in prison.
Before the trial began, the prosecution was short one important witness, Ron Stovall's ex-wife and Ann Trexler's daughter, Tina. Although police determined she was not involved in Ron's murder, Tina asserted her Fifth Amendment rights during a pretrial hearing to avoid testifying against her mother. The state opened its case by outlining the charges against Ann. No one was claiming she'd pulled the trigger, but state attorneys argued she was just as guilty as the man who had. Ann, they claimed, had organized the killing through her hairdresser, Kim Miller.
Ann Trexler was going to pay her X amount of dollars, and she was going to see to it that Ron was done away with. He was killed.
Ann's lawyers argued that the entire case came down to her word against her hairdressers.
You're going to have to decide who you're going to believe in this case. Are you going to believe a church-going, honest, law-abiding woman, or are you going to believe someone that's an admitted cocaine addict?
On May 10th, the prosecution called Kim Miller to the stand. As the packed courtroom listened, Kim explained how Ann had told her about the ongoing custody battle with Ron Stovall, and that Ron wanted to move her granddaughter out of state.
She didn't like the idea. She wanted him dead.
Kim testified that she set up a meeting between Ann and a hitman, her drug dealer boyfriend, Antonio Perez.
The next conversation was discussing a price on having Ron Stovall killed.
Kim told jurors that the price they had finally settled on was $10,000. As proof, prosecutors presented Ann Trexler's financial records. Ann had withdrawn close to that amount from her retirement plan and her credit card just weeks before the killing.
$7,400 had been taken out in this time frame of the 401k. 20-something odd $100 were taken out of the credit card account. Within a few dollars of loose change, it roughly added up to be about $10,000.
Next, jurors were presented with phone records showing that Ann and Kim Miller had called each other multiple times in the weeks before and on the morning of the shooting. The prosecution claimed the records supported Kim's testimony and that the timing of the calls made it highly unlikely the two were just discussing Ann's hair.
You had calls all hours of the night and in the morning, a week before the murder, the morning of the murder.
Ann's defense lawyers, when they began to present their case on May 11th, claimed that Ann had perfectly innocent reasons for making the cash withdrawals prior to the murder. The money, they argued, was to pay legal fees for the custody battle.
The withdrawals of money from the Trexler's accounts was consistent with the retainers that were quoted to them to represent their daughter in the custody battle that was imminent.
The defense also had an ace in the hole, the admitted killer, Antonio Perez. Prosecutors had originally planned on having him testify for them, but at the last minute, he switched sides and testified for the defense.
Did Ann Trexler have anything to do with this homicide?
She had nothing to do with it. The attorney said, listen, how did this happen? And I said, it didn't happen that way. I said, I tried to tell you this before. She did not pay me to do anything to anybody.
Perez claimed that Kim and Ron had a romantic relationship and that was the motive for the killing.
The first time that we ever heard the allegation that Kim Miller and Ron Stovall had a relationship was during the trial. There was never any evidence of that.
No facts and evidence, no evidence anywhere to support that.
Then Ann Trexler took the stand. Her attorney slowly and methodically led Ann through her side of the story.
This lawyer that Tina had last paid his fee to represent Tina?
Jack and I did. We gave the first 1,000 down, and then we were just preparing.
She continued to insist that she had nothing to do with Ron Stovall's murder.
Is there any reason that you wouldn't want him dead?
No, I wouldn't want him to dead. He was the father of my granddaughter.
When the jury retired to consider its verdict on May 14th, Ann's lawyers were confident of victory.
I thought we had a very solid case. They were certainly given ample enough evidence to have found Ann Trexler not guilty.
2 hours later, the jury returned with a verdict. They found Ann Trexler guilty of the murder of Ron Stovall.
Didn't seem like there was enough evidence to even convict Ann. They were going on two people who have records. They were going on what they were saying and not even any evidence.
I'm sad that Miss Trexler and me got messed up with Kim. If Miss Trexler would have went to any place else, she wouldn't be in the situation she's in now.
February 15, 2002. According to 30-year-old Jessica McCord, it was supposed to be a romantic occasion for her and her new husband, Jeff.
They said that they had reserved the evening for a belated Valentine's outing.
Jessica was waiting for her ex-husband Alan to arrive to pick up their two daughters, but he was late.
She placed a phone call to Alan's cell phone, leaves a voicemail saying, "Alan, where are you? You're late."
It wasn't like Jessica's ex to miss a visitation with his girls.
He was not going to stop trying to be with those girls.
But before that February evening was over, a 5.5-year custody battle would come to a fiery conclusion. The suburb of Birmingham, Alabama, Jessica Callis grew up knowing what it was like to be caught between warring parents.
It was a turbulent home. I mean, her father beat her mother. He had been abusive toward the girls.
Jessica was 6 when her parents divorced in 1978. After the split, her mother took the kids to Hoover, Alabama, and remarried.
Mom was remarried to a very nice man. They were very concerned about Jessica. They did things for Jessica. They tried to keep her on track in school.
Despite their best efforts, at Shades Valley High in the late 80s, Jessica embraced adolescent rebellion.
Jessica was very antisocial, almost, where you mocked the people who were the most popular in school.
And at Shades Valley High, few people were more popular than Alan Bates.
He was elected class president for grades 9, 10, and 11.
The fact that she went for Alan was very unusual.
But when the pair hooked up in 1989, they had undeniable chemistry.
Very physical, all over each other. They really seemed to have a good time together.
She was really his first serious relationship in school.
Then, a few months into Alan and Jessica's senior year, things got a little too serious.
She did not graduate from high school. She became pregnant.
In January of 1990, Jessica dropped out of school, and she and Alan were married.
Alan, of course, was very adamant that he was going to be there for his child.
A month after the wedding, Jessica gave birth to a daughter. In the fall, the young family moved to Montevallo, Alabama, so Alan could attend college on a theater scholarship.
At first, it was great. They seemed to be really happy with each other and their newfound freedom of being a married couple.
But shortly after the birth of their second daughter in 1992, Jessica and Alan's relationship started to deteriorate.
She was very jealous of the time he spent with co-eds. Since she was not in school, she felt very threatened.
She showed up unexpectedly a whole lot while Alan was really busy and created a lot of disturbances.
The couple separated in 1994. Jessica and the kids moved in with her mother, while Alan found an apartment and filed for divorce.
It was not a nasty divorce. In fact, when they moved out of the house, Alan hugged her and kissed her and wished her the best.
Shortly after the divorce, Alan met art historian Tara Clue. The two began dating.
Tara was great. She took care of Alan. She was an even
temperament, a very calming effect.
She was devoted to his kids. She took them places, she did things with them, and she loved them.
Alan and Tara married in June of 2000. Jessica, however, wasn't thrilled by the prospect of her kids having a stepmother.
She did not want the children to have anything to do with Tara.
She started skipping visitations. She started shortening visitations. She started using the kids as pawns.
Things grew even more contentious when Alan and Tara moved to Maryland.
She pulled him out of school. She was homeschooling him, moving him around very often, leaving him with her mom so that he couldn't have access to him. She did all those things.
In June of 2000, Jessica got remarried. Her new husband, Jeff McCord, was a police officer Jessica met through her new job.
Jessica McCord worked for the Birmingham Police Department as a dispatcher. I became familiar with many people in law enforcement.
Her contacts in law enforcement, however, didn't help her in her ongoing custody battle, nor did her increasingly combative behavior. In December 2001, she was arrested for skipping a custody hearing and sentenced to 10 days in jail.
She spent most of her Christmas that year in jail because she was in contempt of court.
Finally, Alan had had enough. He began the new year vowing to get control of his children's custody.
Alan decided that he was going to do something different, and that was, possibly go for custody of the children.
On February 15th, 2002, Alan and Tara flew to Birmingham for depositions related to his latest custody challenge. After renting a car at the airport, they headed over to Jessica's to pick up the children.
Alan had arranged to take them over to Atlanta, where his parents lived.
But they would never make it.
The fire had burned so hot.
2002, Alan Bates and his wife Tara were on their way to pick up Alan's two kids from his ex-wife Jessica McCord outside of Birmingham, Alabama. The former high school sweethearts were locked in a custody battle that had recently become contentious.
Alan just wanted to see his kids, and she made sure at every point he could not.
That night, Alan's dad was expecting Alan, Tara, and the kids to arrive in Atlanta at around 9 o'clock. At 10 p.m., with his son an hour overdue, Philip Bates picked up the phone.
We could never get in touch with them. We dialed their phone numbers, their cell phones, multiple times, never got an answer. We called the house, didn't get an answer.
Fearing an accident, Philip Bates began phoning the authorities.
I called the Alabama State Patrol. I called the Georgia Highway Department.
Neither agency had anything unusual to report, yet. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning on February 16th when a farmer just outside Atlanta dialed 911 and reported what he thought was a forest fire.
The police respond and put out the fire, where they discover at the heart of it this car.
Our fire chief had opened the trunk to put out the fire, to be sure all the fire was out. And that's when they realized that human remains were probably in the trunk.
The two bodies in the trunk were burned beyond recognition. So was the car. The license plate, however, had escaped the inferno.
The heat from the fire caused the screws to melt, and it fell off the car and was not burned.
Running a trace on the tag gave police their first lead.
It was a rental car from Avis Rental out of the Birmingham airport.
A call to Avis gave investigators the name on the rental form: Alan Bates. At around 5:30 a.m., shortly after police had traced the rental's tag, Philip Bates also phoned Avis's Birmingham office, trying to track down his son.
The person who answered the phone says, "I need you to call the Georgia Bureau of Investigation at this number."
Philip Bates immediately contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and filled them in on the ongoing custody battle between Alan and Jessica.
Agent Williams and I immediately got in the car and started heading to Birmingham, Alabama.
The investigators went straight to the police department, where Jeff McCord was on duty. At first, Jeff didn't seem too concerned that Georgia detectives were anxious to talk to his wife Jessica about Alan and Tara's disappearance.
Anytime there's a homicide, you immediately look at family and friends first and foremost.
And Jessica's ongoing custody dispute with Alan certainly made her an obvious suspect.
Pretty easy to see how at least his family would see that she might have done something.
But Jeff told the investigators Jessica had nothing to do with Alan and Tara's disappearance.
Jeff's story from the very beginning was Alan and Tara never showed up to pick up the children.
Jeff explained that when Alan failed to show
the movies to see The Lord of the Rings, we asked him, did he have any proof that he did that? And he said, why, yes, I do. I believe I still have the ticket stubs, which he pulled out of his wallet.
Jeff said that Jessica was now at her mother's house with the kids, so the Georgia cops headed over there to speak with her.
She gave us the exact same story as Jeff.
In a calm and unconcerned manner, she told police that when her ex-husband didn't show, she called his cell phone and got no answer. The coroner confirmed that the bodies found outside Atlanta were indeed Alan and Tara. The autopsy also recovered a single 9mm slug from Alan's wrist.
One of the bullets struck his watch, and it caused the bullet to tumble enough and slow down so that when it entered his body, it did not go through and through.
On the morning of February 17th, Alabama authorities arrived at the McCord house with a search warrant, but no one was home. Police forcibly entered the home, and in the basement family room, investigators found brand new flooring and hastily patched wallpaper.
They had done such a poor job. The wallpaper lines did not match up, you know, the old with the new.
And when we pulled that wallpaper down, we found the bullet hole in the wall.
Inside the wall, the cops also found a bullet. And on a piece of furniture, they found a tiny blood stain.
Just a little bit on the leg of the coffee table, and, you know, there was concern, would it be enough to test?
That afternoon, the cops sent the bullet and blood sample to the crime lab. But it took 2 days for police to find the McCords. On February 20th,
initially they left the state, and when they had come back into Alabama, they met with an attorney and were staying with Michael Upton.
Jessica and Jeff surrendered and were taken into custody. At the arraignment later that day, the state of Alabama charged Jessica and Jeff McCord with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The DA announced he would seek the death penalty.
There was not going to be any competent play. Not with Jessica.
Coming up, prosecutors prepare to prove Jessica killed to keep her kids. But to win the case, they'd first have to disprove the couple's alibi.
Jessica's mother testified they were at her house at midnight and could not have been in Georgia burning up a car.
Due to a long custody battle with her ex-husband, Alan Bates, Jessica McCord was no stranger to the courtroom. But when she walked into a Birmingham court on the morning of February 11, 2003, it wasn't her kids' future at stake. It was her own. Charged with first-degree murder, she was accused of killing Alan, his second wife, Tara, and torching their bodies outside Atlanta. Jessica's husband, Jeff, was also charged with the crime. Awaiting his own trial, he'd refused to testify against her.
I was not going to be the person to turn on, quote unquote, turn on her.
Jeff's unwillingness to testify wasn't the only hurdle the prosecution would have to get over to win a conviction.
It was based on circumstantial evidence. We had no eyewitnesses, no direct evidence of what had occurred.
The state began its opening arguments by telling the jury that Jessica and Jeff had ambushed Alan and Tara at the McCord's home in Hoover when they arrived to pick up the children.
He was probably the shooter. It was her plan. She convinced him to go along with it, but she was smart enough to make him do the actual shooting.
Then, according to the prosecution's theory, Jessica and Jeff had loaded the dead bodies in the rental car, driven it over 200 miles to a town outside Atlanta, and torched it. The prosecution claimed Jessica and Jeff had spent the next morning at home, hastily cleaning up the crime scene.
They had gone to great lengths to cover everything up, ripping up the carpet and laying tile.
But the cleanup, as the prosecution claimed, had missed two crucial pieces of evidence. First, there was the bullet police had found hidden inside the wall.
That bullet was compared to a bullet that was taken from the body of Alan Bates, and it was shown that it was fired from the same gun.
Second was the tiny splotch of blood on the McCord's coffee table.
The blood on the coffee table was later determined to match Tara.
It was incriminating evidence, but according to Jessica's defense, none of it proved she had killed her ex-husband or torched his rental car. And her alibi, they claimed, made it impossible.
Jessica and Jeff claimed that they had gone to a movie, and then they had gone to her mother's house to drop off some medicine for one of the children. Jessica's mother testified to corroborate that they were at her house at midnight and could not have been in Georgia burning up a car.
But then prosecutors revealed a damning piece of evidence against Jessica. And it had to do with the phone call she made to her ex-husband when he allegedly failed to show up to take the children. According to the state, the call was made solely to establish her alibi.
When you dial a cell phone, it hits a particular tower.
His cell phone was called, and it hit on a tower that was within a 1 to 3 mile radius of the McCord home.
Which prosecutors said meant Alan was already dead on the McCord's family room floor when his phone rang. Even more damning, cell tower records showed Jessica had gone on to make several more calls later that evening. And the phone she used wasn't in Birmingham, much less a movie theater.
We were able to see that the cell phones being used tracked the route headed east to Georgia.
They drove in tandem. One followed the other one over to Georgia. They dumped the car with the bodies in it, get in the car together and drive back to Alabama.
Faced with such damning evidence, Jessica McCord took the stand in her own defense on February 14th.
Jessica did not change her story. She thought if she could just tell her story, that she could get people to believe her.
Jessica also told the jury that Alan was not the nice guy everyone made him out to be.
She tried to portray herself as the victim and Alan as the bad guy. He was the one trying to take her children away from her.
On February 15th, 2003, a year to the day after Alan and Tara were murdered, the jury found Jessica McCord guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder.
There was too much evidence against her. There was no way that she could possibly get away with it.
I think it was inbred in her. Her mother had a bad relationship with her father, and that was her way of controlling the situation. She did not want him to have contact with those girls, not because he was a bad father, not because he wasn't supporting them, just because she could control it.
And now Jessica's life was in the control of a jury.
After they convicted Jessica of capital murder, the jury had the option of life without parole or death.
But before the jury made their decision, an unrepentant Jessica took the stand one last time.
She did not apologize. She did not say, "I'm sorry." She didn't beg for mercy. She did talk about her children, which I think is ultimately what saved her life.
On February 21st, Jessica McCord was sentenced to life without parole.
Alan's two kids are going to grow up with this horrible set of circumstances that they have to try to make sense of. They deserve the opportunity to say whatever they need to say to her, and they couldn't.
On the evening of April 25, 2001, patrol cars raced through the streets of Pleasant Grove, Utah. Their destination, the Eagle Lodge parking lot, where just minutes earlier, witnesses had reported seeing a woman trying to set a car on fire.
They saw a female figure fleeing from the vehicle. They found a burning rag stuffed into the gas tank.
But when police got there, they found a lot more than a smoldering rag.
As I approached the vehicle, somebody then mentioned that, oh, and by the way, there's a body inside the vehicle.
The body belonged to 54-year-old Mina Pahela, a successful and respected local businesswoman, shot in the back of the head.
Everybody was wondering why somebody would kill somebody who was seemingly so sweet.
Police were wondering the same thing until they began looking into Pahela's financial records.
They started seeing a chain of embezzlement to the tune of about $34,000.
The trail of bad checks seemed to lead back to Mina's friend and business administrator, Carrie Brown.
She was a very sweet woman. I loved her dearly.
But police had to wonder, if Carrie and Mina were such good friends, then why was Carrie stealing from her? And most importantly, where was Carrie when her friend was in the Eagle Lodge parking lot with a bullet in her head? Children in the small town of Sholo, Arizona.
My family owned restaurants. My dad worked in a sawmill. I had a great life. My parents loved every one of us children, and we never doubted that.
When she grew up, Carrie strived for that same stability, even though by the time she was 33, she had 3 children and 2 divorces.
She was just a single mom, just barely getting by, just trying to raise these kids.
If there were any financial struggles, we never noticed them as kids. We were happy, we had fun.
In 1995, Carrie took a job at the local police department as a 911 dispatcher. It was there that she met Matt Massino.
He was a police officer on an Indian reservation called Fort McDowell in Arizona.
The couple dated for over 3 years and even had a son together, but the relationship was on again, off again. In 2000, Carrie moved to Orem, Utah to stay with her sister Connie.
She just wanted to get away for a little bit to try and reestablish her foundation, basically, and get back on her feet.
And once in Utah, Carrie seemed determined to make a fresh start.
As soon as I got to Utah, I started looking for work immediately. I answered an ad in the paper for an activities director. I was hired the next day.
The activities director position was at the Mira Vista Retirement Center, owned by 54-year-old businesswoman Mina Pahela.
Mina Pahela was a Filipino immigrant to the United States. She had basically come here with nothing. She had built herself a pretty substantial fortune.
This was a woman who had done everything right. She made a good living, she had a lot of friends, and she was very involved in her church. If she had a flaw, it was that she trusted people too much.
She certainly seemed to trust Carrie. From the start, Mina took a shine to her new employee.
Once I started working there, Mina and I got close really very quickly. She was very charitable, very sweet woman. I loved her dearly.
Her and Mina's relationship was just a good friendship. And Mina was happy to have someone there who she could trust, and they worked well together.
After 18 months on the job, Mina promoted Carrie to administrator.
She took me out to lunch one day and asked me if I would take on the administrator's position.
She was responsible for both accounts receivable and accounts payable. with no double checks. So there was no one to monitor what Carrie was doing. She was given total access to the business.
By then, Carrie's on-again, off-again relationship with Matt Messino was back on, and he was a regular weekend visitor from Arizona. After one such visit, Carrie found herself pregnant again. With a baby on the way, Mina began to look out for her employee and friend more than ever.
After I got pregnant, I was very ill, and so she would make me try to eat these weird Filipino foods because it was the thing that would cure me or make me feel better. And she would go buy me groceries to take home so that I would feel better.
On April 21st, 2001, Carrie gave birth to a daughter by C-section. The baby's father traveled up from Arizona for the birth.
2 days after having the C-section, she comes into work, which she described that as she was being thorough and wanted to make sure things were taken care of.
I was the only administrative staff there. I was doing everything. And so without me, payroll probably wouldn't have got done, so I made an effort to go up and get payroll to her.
Just 4 days later, however, Carrie would have a lot more to worry about than getting the payroll out. It was a little after 10 p.m. on April 25th when police responding to a 911 call arrived at the parking lot of the Eagle Lodge in Pleasant Grove. 2 witnesses had reported seeing a woman trying to set fire to a car before fleeing the scene.
There was a vehicle parked that had a towel sticking out of the fuel filler tube, and somebody had tried to burn the car.
Witnesses told police they had chased the woman, but then turned back to put out the flames before the vehicle had a chance to catch fire.
Witnesses described her, I believe, as around 30-something years old, shoulder length, brown, straight hair. She was clutching her stomach. She was kind of hunched over and not running very fast.
She seemed to be holding something or holding her stomach, but she had one arm either as though she had a bundle or were in some pain.
And when they looked inside the car, police discovered this was more than just a case of attempted arson.
A woman with a gunshot wound to their head, covered in a blanket in her own vehicle. You had a burning gas rag stuffed in the gas tank. Right off the bat, it looked like a classic case of murder.
By dawn, police had identified the victim as Mina Pahela.
It was very obvious this was not a self-inflicted wound. Someone had placed her in the position she was in the car and had actually covered her up in an attempt to conceal her.
The morning after the shooting, an employee at Mina's bank, alerted by a string of bounced checks, suggested that detectives might want to take a close look at the victim's nursing home business. The next day, detectives, with the help of a forensic accountant, did exactly that.
When they started looking into the books of the Mira Vista Care Center, they found a chain of embezzlement that was going on to the tune of about $34,000.
Not only that, some of the records appeared to be missing from the office. Detectives soon learned that only 2 people were authorized to sign checks on behalf of the nursing home. One was lying in the morgue. The other was Carrie Brown. On April 27th, 2 days after the murder of nursing home owner Mina Pahela, police interviewed Carrie Brown, the employee they suspected of stealing thousands from Mina's bank account.
They found out about this embezzlement, and so that was a clear motive for the murder, and that led them to Brown as their prime and their only suspect.
Carrie, however, insisted she was innocent. She told police that on the day of the murder, she was spending time with her family.
We thought we'd take my son out to Utah Lake and play at the park and stuff.
And according to Carrie, at the time witnesses had seen someone running away from Mina's car, she was shopping at Target. When questioned about the embezzlement, however, Carrie was a little less cooperative.
She was deceptive. She would avoid answering questions. She would never volunteer any information.
Days later, armed with a warrant, detectives searched Carrie's house, hoping to find more information than Carrie was willing to provide on Mira Vista Retirement Center's finances. They found what they were looking for.
They served a search warrant on Carrie's house and found some of the records there.
And it wasn't just the missing financial records that detectives seized from the house. Thanks to a photo taken at Utah Lake, police were able to identify the clothing Carrie had worn on the day of the murder. They confiscated the clothes as possible evidence. On May 11th, Utah police paid a visit to Arizona.
We sent a couple of our investigators down to interview her boyfriend, the father of this child that they had together.
Matt Messino admitted he had been in Utah the day of the shooting, but he insisted he knew nothing about it, at least at first.
He listened to our investigators, listened to some of the evidence they were questioning him about, and then he accused Carrie Brown of killing Mina. He made a statement that he thought she should be arrested for it.
Messino told the Utah investigators that his service weapon had been missing the day of the shooting.
Miss Brown's boyfriend saw his gun on the dresser in their bedroom just before he went to bed, just before the day of the murder. When he woke up, the gun was not there.
And according to Matt, when he asked Carrie about it, she admitted to taking it.
He had left it sitting out in his bedroom while he was visiting up here in Utah, and her story was that she wanted to secure the firearm, so she moved it.
Detectives sent the gun off for ballistics testing, and when the results came back, they were damning to say the least. While the outside of the gun had been methodically cleaned, the lab had found a trace of blood inside the barrel, and not just any blood.
During the discharge, right after that, there is a vacuum created and there's a recoil that will draw anything in the vicinity into the gun. And some blood apparently was drawn into the barrel of the gun. So forensics actually managed to take a blood sample and compare it to Miss Pahela, and they found that it was her blood.
Which meant that Mina Pahela had been shot at close range with Matt Messino's service revolver. On April 3rd, 2002, police arrived at the home of Carrie Brown's sister, where Carrie had been staying for the last few months with her children. On the doorstep, detectives charged Carrie with the murder of Mina Pahela and the embezzlement of funds from Mina's business.
I explained to her that I was taking her into custody for homicide and secured her in handcuffs.
I was a little shocked, to say the least. I was devastated.
Following 3 months in jail, Carrie was released on bail in July of 2002 and returned home.
I couldn't believe my mom was being accused of something like that. I mean, she was doing fine, better than she had been doing in a long time. And I couldn't even think of my mom doing anything like that.
A preliminary hearing was scheduled for October 22nd. But before then, the case would take an unexpected twist. Since the time of Carrie's arrest, a new prosecutor had been appointed to the case. And Sherry Reagan had a very different view from earlier prosecutors on just how strong the state's evidence against Carrie really was.
The Utah County Attorney's Office felt like they didn't have enough evidence.
Reagan knew that even though Mina's DNA had been found on the weapon, that didn't prove Carrie had fired it.
I dismissed it, and it was a very unpopular thing to do.
You know, we knew we could not positively put her at the crime scene. And therefore it becomes a case of believing that she did it based on circumstantial evidence and motive.
It looked to Carrie like she was off the hook.
I tried to resume a normal life. I tried to live a normal life.
But that didn't mean authorities had given up.
We were in the right place, we just weren't ready to be able to prove that to a jury yet.
Detectives first set to work trying to prove or disprove Carrie's alibi for the night of the shooting.
She said that she had gone to a Target store that would have been about 5 to 7 miles away.
Carrie's subpoenaed phone records showed she had made a call on her cell around the time Mina's car had been discovered at Eagle Lodge.
If you've got the right computer records from the cell phone company, I can say that your cell phone call was made to or from this tower at this time.
The closest cell tower that had picked up her phone call, it put her at that location near the Eagles at that time when she said she was at Target.
That put Carrie in the vicinity at the time of the murder. To further strengthen their case against her, investigators also decided to test the clothes they had confiscated from Carrie for gunshot residue.
We had some GSR, gunshot residue testing, done on the clothing she had on that day, and that came back positive.
Which meant that she had been in the vicinity of a gunshot on the day of the murder. In April 2004, she was recharged with the crime. And this time, prosecutors were determined to make it stick. Coming up, Carrie finally faces a judge, but the outcome is far from certain.
You have all these arrows pointing to Ms. Brown, but you just don't have that one keystone, that one witness that will say that she pulled the trigger, that she was the one who did this.
When Carrie Brown walked into a Utah courtroom on August 6, 2004 for her preliminary hearing, over 3.5 years had passed since the death of Mina Pahela. Carrie was accused of stealing over $30,000 from her former boss, then shooting her in the back of the head to cover up the scam.
In Utah, we have what's called a preliminary hearing. It's held in front of a judge, and the judge decides whether there's enough evidence to
go to trial. As the hearing began, prosecutors presented what they claimed was Carrie's motive for the killing.
We did bring in a forensic accountant who presented our theory that Ms. Brown was embezzling money. Check is written to, the ABC Supply Company for supplies for a nursing home, and yet the proceeds are going into an account, which is a personal account for Ms. Brown.
Prosecutors claimed that it was only a matter of time before Mina discovered what was going on. And in April of 2001, it looked like that time had come.
What we think happened is that she must have thought that Mina was on the verge of discovering the embezzlement.
According to prosecutors, Carrie offered to accompany Mina to an appointment and, using her boyfriend's service revolver, shot her in the car when it was still parked in her garage. She then drove the car to the Eagle Lodge parking lot and attempted to set it on fire. If Carrie was worried by the prosecutor's accusations, she didn't show it.
During the entire preliminary hearing, Ms. Brown was pretty cool. She maintained her composure. She was very unemotional about the whole thing.
Carrie's lawyers put up no defense.
Most defense counsel, I think, believe and believe correctly that all they do is telegraph their defense to the prosecution needlessly by putting on a defense at preliminary hearings.
Having heard all the prosecution's evidence, the judge declared that Carrie would stand trial for both murder and fraud. Carrie's attorneys knew they were facing an uphill struggle to defend her. But it turned out it wasn't just the defense team that had doubts about the trial.
They could never really place her exactly in that driver's seat. They never could place her beside Ms. Pahela in that car. And that was their main problem.
They couldn't prove that she had actually fired the gun.
And that wasn't the only problem for prosecutors. They had convinced a judge, but could they convince a Utah jury? Considering that Carrie had given birth just days before the murder, prosecutors weren't so sure.
This is an area where people value families. They have a lot of children, and that it would be very difficult for them to believe that a new mother would do something like that. We were concerned about the perception that a jury might have.
In April of 2005, Reagan approached Carrie's lawyers with a deal. They would drop the murder charge down to second-degree manslaughter if Carrie pleaded guilty.
We had a lot of discussions. The defense attorney was someone that we work with a lot and who was trying to do a good job for a client, but at the same time, having heard the preliminary hearing, that there was a good chance that she might be convicted of the homicide.
Finally, on August 1st, the two sides reached an agreement. Carrie agreed to accept the prosecution's terms, but on one condition, that she could plead no contest.
It means you don't contest the evidence, You don't admit you committed the crime.
I just think both sides were just tired of chasing each other around, and I think the prosecution just wanted to get some sort of justice for Mina Pahea's family.
The judge sentenced Carrie Brown to a maximum of 30 years in prison.
I know my mom was innocent, not just because she's my mom. There's nothing that could have pushed her to do anything like that.
And because Carrie did not have to admit the crime in her plea agreement, the case still remains controversial.
There was a feeling that she got away with murder because in all she got a 30-year term.
Once in prison, Carrie admitted to friends and family that she had stolen from Mina.
I was forging her name, and I was doctoring the books. A couple hundred here, 300 or 400 there. I took complete advantage of that.
But she continues to insist she had nothing to do with the death of her friend Mina, claiming she only accepted the plea deal for the sake of her family.
I was tired, honestly. I was so tired of fighting. It had been going on for so long. I did not want my family going through that anymore.
"30-year-old Ann Miller had a life most women would envy. A top scientist at a major drug company, the wife of a respected AIDS researcher, and proud mother of a beautiful baby girl. Anne was the image of suburban perfection.
She was attractive, she was intelligent, everything down to her fingernails and toenails.
But Anne's charmed life turned tragic when her husband Eric was struck down by a strange and debilitating illness.
Very violent throwing up, very violent diarrhea.
He started having problems with his vitals. They couldn't figure it out.
But when tests showed Eric died of arsenic poisoning, police began questioning those who knew him, starting with his widow.
The critical question in any homicide investigation is always, why? Why is this person been murdered? And from why...
Ann Breyer grew up in the quaint town of Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. Bright, beautiful, and blonde, Ann seemed perfect in every way.
Ann Miller grew up small town, all-American girl. She was an athlete. She was popular. She was bright.
She was also ambitious. Enrolling at Purdue University in 1988, Ann set her sights on a chemistry degree. But she found her strongest chemical connection when she met and began dating fellow chemistry student Eric Miller. They seemed like a perfect match.
Eric was essentially almost a perfect man. Outstanding student, very good athlete. Eric excelled at everything he did.
It was a pretty good fit for him. She was blonde, and it just kind of looked like Ken and Barbie.
Graduating from Purdue in 1992, Eric and Ann soon married. They pursued their PhDs at North Carolina State and moved into a comfortable house in Raleigh, North Carolina. Eric graduated with his PhD in 1998, but instead of accepting a high-dollar job with one of North Carolina's major drug manufacturers, Eric defied convention by pursuing a research position.
Rather than making big money at one of the pharmaceutical companies, he decides to take a federal grant and work on pediatric AIDS.
As Eric began his work, Ann continued her PhD program at North Carolina State. And in January of 2000, she gave birth to a beautiful daughter. But living on a researcher's income didn't allow for many of the finer things in life.
Eric wasn't making a whole lot of money as a research fellow. None of them do. And because of Ann's need to have, some of the nicer material things in life, a nicer house, nicer cars, have a boat, things like that. She went to work.
Ann abandoned her PhD and used her master's degree in biochemistry to get exactly the type of high-paying job Eric had turned down. She went to work as a research scientist for one of the area's top pharmaceutical companies. and she quickly put her new salary to work.
She had some, cosmetic surgery on her chest, and she also had lots of other kind of beauty treatments.
Her outer appearance was very important to her, how she dressed, her makeup, her hair, everything down to her fingernails and toenails.
Anne quickly became close friends with several of her co-workers. She was especially close to a married research scientist named Daryl Willard.
They were colleagues. They worked side by side.
Soon, Anne was spending more and more time with Daryl and her co-workers after work. And it wasn't long before she wanted to share her new friends with her husband. On the night of November 15th, Eric Miller met up with Daryl Willard and a group of Anne's male co-workers for a guys' night out at a local bowling alley. They ordered a round of beer and hot dogs and hit the lanes.
Eric tastes his beer and says, this beer tastes kind of funky. The other co-worker, who had already, sipped some of his beer, said, hey, that's just bowling alley beer.
But midway through the game, Eric was suddenly struck by a bizarre and painful stomach ailment.
Eric Miller became violently ill.
He's having to bowl with one hand and puke into a trash can with the other.
At first, everyone assumed Eric had come down with a nasty case of food poisoning. But later that night, when his condition began to rapidly worsen, Anne drove him to the hospital. There, Eric's health continued to deteriorate. Doctors ran multiple tests, but were hard-pressed to find a cause for his illness.
Nobody's got a clue as to what's going on. Eric really took good care of himself. Good food, plenty of exercise, it's just a mystery as to why this kid is so sick.
With Anne by his side, Eric stayed in the hospital for 10 days. Finally, on November 24th, his condition began to improve. With doctors' consent, he went home to the care of his wife. But just 6 days after his homecoming, on November 30th, Eric grew sick again after eating dinner. Anne rushed Eric back to the hospital, but his condition was soon worse than ever.
He started having problems with his vitals. They couldn't figure it out.
He started to hallucinate, and they had to put him in physical restraints in the bed. He literally was thrashing on the table.
The following evening, Eric's doctors received the results for the final test run during Eric's hospital stay a week earlier. Those results finally revealed the source of Eric's illness.
The reports come back, they're saying, hey, this is arsenic.
They determined, based on those test results, hey, this guy's got huge amounts of arsenic. Way larger amounts of arsenic than you can expect from any source other than somebody intentionally giving him arsenic in an effort to poison him.
The hospital immediately contacted the Raleigh Police Department with the information. But by the time detectives arrived at the hospital, it was too late.
Unfortunately, around 2 a.m., Eric died as a result of the arsenic poisoning.
The next morning, both Eric's and Anne's families gathered at her home as she began making funeral arrangements for her late husband. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Raleigh detectives and the pathologist examined Eric Miller's toxicology report. And according to the results, whoever poisoned Eric Miller had been doing so for quite some time.
Arsenic doesn't just build up in the body. It's something that had to be put in his system over a period of time.
There's evidence that shows that he probably had been getting small doses of arsenic about 5 months before he actually died.
That meant whoever poisoned Eric would have needed exclusive access to him for a long period of time. It didn't take cops long to come up with a suspect.
Anne is the only one that had the constant access to Eric to give him all these doses.
She was the person that was in close proximity with access to him. Each time he got sick, when she was the person who was there, that would have pointed to her being the person to give him the arsenic.
But when cops tried to question Anne, the distraught widow refused to speak with them.
She kept this avoidance strategy, and she would break down at convenient times when she didn't want to go talk to, the police.
Anne's bizarre behavior certainly added fuel to cops' suspicions, but they needed evidence to tie her to the murder. The next day, detectives secured a warrant to inspect the Miller home. Their search didn't turn up any arsenic. But cops did find an arsenic compound called sodium cacodylate at Anne's work 2 days later. Since Anne did work at a pharmaceutical lab, it was hardly a smoking gun. But while investigators didn't have any proof Anne poisoned her husband, their search did turn up evidence of something else: an affair.
When we cracked open Anne's work computer, we were able to determine, hey, this girl, she's been having an affair.
In December of 2000, 30-year-old pediatric AIDS researcher Eric Miller had died of an apparent case of arsenic poisoning. Suspecting his wife Anne was responsible for the crime, Raleigh police detectives had executed a search on the pharmaceutical lab where she worked on December 4th. They quickly found samples of arsenic. They also found something else: email evidence of an affair between Anne and her co-worker Daryl Willard.
She developed what appeared to be a romantic relationship with him.
While steamy emails certainly suggested a motive, it didn't prove Anne poisoned Eric. Digging deeper through Anne's work materials, cops next discovered Anne and Daryl had flown to Chicago together for a suspicious weekend business trip just 3 days before Eric was first hospitalized.
They took off on a Friday afternoon, checked into the Ritz-Carlton, and registered as Mr. and Mrs. Daryl Willard. Spent the weekend there, ordering an awful lot of room service, then flew back into Raleigh on Sunday.
But detectives uncovered the most suspicious piece of information when they questioned Anne and Daryl's co-workers. According to several witnesses, it was Daryl who purchased and poured Eric Miller's beer at the bowling alley the night Eric first got sick.
Daryl Willard purchases that beer and pours the beer, but hands the beer to each person, including Eric Miller. And shortly after drinking that beer, Eric Miller became violently ill.
We think Anne, had talked Daryl into poisoning Eric. It was almost like she sort of played around with it in the beginning, a little dose here, a little dose there, but then when it gets really into the late fall and in the winters, where she really becomes very serious with it.
On Sunday morning, January 21st, Raleigh police detectives knocked on Daryl Willard's front door, armed with a search warrant.
Daryl comes to the door and has the distinct look on his face of someone who is fully expecting to go to jail. That morning was a bright, sunshiny Sunday morning, and I felt for all the world like I was looking at a man who full well expected that the next thing was going to happen was I was going to reach out with a pair of handcuffs and handcuff him.
While an army of officers searched through Daryl Willard's house, Detective Chris Morgan took Daryl aside for questioning. Daryl insisted he had nothing to do with Eric Miller's death, but Detective Morgan suspected he was hiding something.
I said, Daryl, I'll be honest with you. From the phone records, from the emails, I think you've been used by a woman. Daryl Willard looked up at me and said, yeah, and she did a good job of it. The next thing out of his mouth was, I can't talk to you anymore. I got to call my lawyer.
When cops wrapped up their search of his house several hours later, they hadn't found any arsenic. The following afternoon at 5:30 p.m., Daryl Willard's wife pulled her car into the driveway of the couple's home. She had just returned from work. When she walked into the garage, she made a horrifying discovery.
The very next day, after the search had taken place and the search warrants had become public, Daryl Willard committed suicide.
His wife goes to work that morning. He stays behind, and he shoots himself.
In a suicide note tacked to the wall, Darrell Willard had written an apology to his family. He also denied responsibility for Eric Miller's death. When word of Darrell Willard's suicide spread through Raleigh, Ann Miller packed her bags and moved in with her sister in Wilmington, North Carolina. Meanwhile, back in Raleigh, cops were trying to figure out their next step. Their investigation into Ann had hit a huge roadblock. Their biggest lead had just killed himself.
All of a sudden, this person whose home had been searched in connection with the murder investigation was dead.
We didn't have sufficient evidence to proceed on a charge, and so we were scrambling, trying to find any way that we could possibly get sufficient evidence of what happened.
Desperate to get the case back on track, cops went to question Darrell's widow, Yvette, the next day. In the course of her interview, she dropped a bombshell.
She said, Darrell confessed he had an affair with Ann to me. He told me that he didn't have anything to do with Eric's death, and he told me that he had been to see the lawyer, Rick Gammon, and he said Rick Gammon told him that he could be charged with attempted murder.
Confident Darrell's conversation contained incriminating information vital to their case, detectives immediately filed paperwork with the district attorney's office to obtain the information from his attorney, Rick Gammon. But Gammon refused to release transcripts of the conversation, citing attorney-client privilege.
When you tell your lawyer something, you have the assurance that it's confidential and that it will not be shared.
Undeterred, investigators filed numerous motions with the Wake County and the state court systems in an attempt to get the information. But Gammon appealed the requests at every level.
There was a long, protracted battle to keep this information private.
I had been told that attorney-client privilege was sacrosanct in North Carolina, and it could never be breached.
Over 2 years passed while the case was tied up in litigation. Meanwhile, Ann Miller was busy building herself a new life.
She purchased a home. She also got another job at another pharmaceutical company. And she married a man by the name of Paul Kuntz, who was in a Christian rock band.
It didn't look good for investigators. With their case deadlocked in court, they were helpless to make an arrest. And it wasn't long before they couldn't help but wonder, was Ann Miller going to get away with murder? By spring of 2004, the investigation into the poisoning death of Eric Miller had been in limbo for over 3 years. Detectives could only wait while information vital to their case was being contested in the North Carolina courts.
We were, over a year into the investigation, and we didn't have sufficient evidence to proceed on a charge.
Meanwhile, the case's primary suspect, Ann Miller, was now going by Ann Kuntz after moving to Wilmington, North Carolina, and marrying a new husband.
He was in a Christian rock band, and she kind of settled into a very domestic life.
Finally, in May 2004, the case went before the North Carolina Supreme Court. The court ruled that Rick Gammon, the attorney for Ann's lover Darrell Willard, had to reveal the contents of his conversation with his now deceased client.
The ruling was that it did not damage, injure, or do away with attorney-client privilege. It was a very narrowly defined case, but it gave us what we needed.
On May 27th, Rick Gammon hand-delivered notes from his conversation with Darrell Willard to the prosecutor, who turned them over to police. When investigators read their contents, it confirmed what they always suspected.
Darrell Willard told Mr. Gammon that he had met Ann Miller in the parking lot of the hospital while Eric was being treated there, and she had come down to his SUV, and they were sitting there, and she held up a syringe, and she said, I just used this to inject poison into Eric's IV.
She got there and did the fatal dose. That conversation between Rick and Darrell was the smoking pistol.
Prosecutors spent the next 6 months preparing their case for the grand jury. On September 27, 2004, the grand jury indicted Ann Miller Kuntz for the murder of Eric Miller. That same day, Ann returned to Raleigh and turned herself in at police headquarters. Carted off to the Wake County Jail, her bond was set at $3 million.
Somebody asked, "Aren't you happy?" I said, 2 men are laying dead in the ground. 3 families torn to shreds. What in the hell is there to be happy about?
With Ann behind bars, police and the district attorney's office began building their case for trial. They knew they had an uphill fight. While strong, all their evidence against Ann was circumstantial. And if their investigation had proved anything, it was that Ann was a master manipulator.
She was a chameleon. She could appear seductive one minute, and she would look like a Puritan the next minute. And it scared me. It really scared me. Going into a room with 12 good citizens of Wake County who are still human, it scared the hell out of me.
But a jury would never hear Ann's case. In November of 2005, Ann agreed to a plea deal. Under the terms of the deal, Ann would plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and the reduced charge of second-degree murder. She would serve a minimum of 25 years in prison. With Eric Miller's family's blessing, the DA's office agreed to the deal. On November 7, 2005, Ann Miller Kantz shuffled into the Wake County Courthouse wearing a striped jail jumpsuit and shackled at the wrists. Her attorney read a prepared statement in which Ann acknowledged playing a role in Eric's death.
There was no true admission of her guilt. There was no regret. There still is no regret. The only thing she regrets is that she got caught.
Evil doesn't always appear with horns and a tail. Sometimes it can be a demure, well-educated, well-spoken suburbanite housewife who appears on the outside to be all sunshine and roses and dark-hearted as they come on the inside.